I know what you're thinking. Why is the creator of the secret Holy Crapper making a Deltarune video? Has Guilt947 gone woke?
I don't know!
No, I just do whatever I feel like. And for you Deltarune people, just a fair warning not to expect me to do much stuff like this. I am the least consistent YouTuber of all time, and I apologize for my nasty voice as I was feeling a little sick while recording this, but I couldn't wait. Anyway, the reason I'm making this is because Deltarune Chapter 5 is just a week away, and with every release it's prime time to put together what we know from the last one and try to piece together how this game unfolds. And I decided I'm not going to miss out this time, because my video will be correct. I'm the most important. Actually, this is not much of a theory so much as it is an analysis of one of Toby Fox's lesser discussed yet not really obscure inspirations, and how that game has a very surprising amount of parallels not just to Deltarune, but to the game that precedes it. I'm of course talking about Undertale. It's a game I'm surprised not many people have actually compared to Deltarune in detail. I'm not going to beat around the bush like a moron as Super Paper Mario. If you know me, you know this game is very foundational to my enjoyment of games and what I like to make. But because of my attachment to this game, it's very easy for me to see its influence on others. But I'll get to the point. This video is a compilation of all the connections between Super Paper Mario and both Undertale and Deltarune I could find. I can't promise I'm going to come up with any crazy conclusions like, well, this happened in this game, so that means Deltarune is going to end the same way. No, that's just stupid. And you'll soon realize that for as many connections as there are, I do make quite a few reaches to actually make comparisons. Still, though, I think there might be some meaning people can gather from this, so this is all just some fuel for thought. Starting with Chapter 1, Lineland and the Yule Desert. Immediately you'll notice that both Deltarune Chapter 1 and Lineland Road feature blocky looking trees, and honestly that's the strongest link here in terms of the environment. Both chapters feature a dragon, or at least a character who resembles a dragon, because Susie takes the role of the dragon, according to Gerson. But that's where the similarities end. Evidently Susie does not die in Chapter 1, she does not get her brain scrambled by an evil clown. But now that I mention it, there are evil clowns at the end of both of these chapters. Again, there's nothing strong here, but I think that's okay. After all, the first chapter of any game is usually the most basic, as it serves just a set of the very basics of the game's rules and the story. Chapter 2, Merlee's Mansion. Of course you immediately connect the dots. Both this and Deltarune's Cyberwill feature a mansion. The one in SPM isn't explicitly digital, though, but that's more so an overarching artistic theme, as most of the game is in some way inspired by geometric computer-generated art. Secondly, the antagonist Mimi is very similar to Muffet. Both are spiders who dress formally and value currency more than the lives of others. In this way, the stronger connection is to Undertale, but even still, Mimi does connect to Deltarune in an interesting way. Even though they don't really resemble each other much as characters, Spamton does infiltrate and take over the Queen's Mansion in the weird route, just like Mimi took over Merlee's Mansion. Both characters are also very fixated on money and their ambitions coming true, so I'd say this is still a strong parallel. And I suppose both Merlee and Queen are well-meaning but kind of zany characters. I don't know. Chapter 3, The Bitlands. Okay, before I actually get into this chapter, I will say the parallels between chapters here do actually become a little bit blurry, but strangely the connections are only ever off by like one chapter. Of course, Deltarune Chapter 3 is all about Mr. Antenna, the wacky game show host who appears out of nowhere and has a square head. And who else has these same qualities but the Internet, who appears at the end of SPM Chapter 2 before the Mimi battle. So while he doesn't appear in Chapter 3, the fact that both square-headed game show host characters appear right after introducing the small, malevolent spinner of yarns in their respective games, I would argue this connection still holds up. As for the Bitlands itself, it is very retro game inspired, but again, that's about it. Though in relation to Undertale, this chapter does feature Francis, a nerdy lizard who enjoys animation, video games, robots, and specifically cats. If I remember correctly, Toby Fox even directly mentioned that he was inspired by the lizard from SPM while creating Alphys back in the 10th anniversary stream. And in the opposite sort of way that the chapter's game show hosts are swapped, so are the robotic cats. Cyberwill features Task Manager and the Tasks, who are servants to the Queen just as the Meow Maids are servants to Francis. Chapter 4, Outer Space. Okay, there really isn't a lot here, I'll admit, although you do team up with a green character who helps guide you through each world, being Squirps in Outer Space and Gerson Boom in the Dark Sanctuary. We're already off to a rough start. Evidently the Dark Sanctuary does not resemble Outer Space, like, at all except for the third area, I suppose. But what I will say is both the Woe Zone and the later areas of the Dark Sanctuary are some of the most labyrinthian and odd-looking places to navigate in their respective games. Both even feature changing gravity to an extent. And yes, I suppose you could argue that the Roaring Knight in this context can be compared to Mr. L. Most people assume the Knight is another character's alter ego of sorts, acting as an antagonist while possibly being a good person at heart, and also exhibiting similar behaviors to the protagonist. Just like how Mr. L is, well, I actually don't know who this guy is. Okay, Chapter 5. The Land of Crag and the Flora Kingdom. A kingdom of flowers, huh? Well, this is the main reason why I decided to make this video if you couldn't tell. As we've known for a while, Chapter 5 will probably have a Dark World inside Asgore's flower shop, where the flowers live in a kingdom of Asgore's rule. But you probably want me to address the Mega Muth in the room. If Deltarune Chapter 5 and SPM Chapter 5 are parallels, then why is the Flower World Japanese? Well, this is where I have to break the crushing news to you that Deltarune and SPM do not have the same amount of chapters. So as we approach the latter half of each, things get a little bit squished together. As such, I believe Deltarune Chapter 5 is a mashup of both Chapters 5 and 6 from SPM. So let's properly start drawing some connections. Of course, in both Undertale and Deltarune, Asgore is a lonely king associated with flowers, as he lives surrounded by them in both games. In SPM, the Flora Kingdom is a long-running kingdom of Floro-sapiens, who are just sentient flowers. They hold their kings in high regard, and as of late have been at odds with the Cragdons, who are a race of cave people who have been polluting their water supply. They live in a sort of desert, you could say. And if my belief about Chapter 5 and the countless Woody Theory soldiers still fighting in the Chapter 5 trenches are correct, then the Flower King Dark World will not only consist of a Japan-style kingdom of flowers, but also an American Western-style desert. There's a lot of duality at play in this chapter, which we can tell by just how prominent the colors pink and yellow are, which we've known is a significant combination of colors since Chapter 2. It could be that they're two separate kingdoms, or at least that these areas are diverse enough that we see darkness unique to each of these areas. I don't think there's going to be cave people and mammoths in Deltarune, but at the very least there is a desert in the Flower Kingdom, it seems. As for SPM Chapter 6, the Summer Kingdom, it is a very short but crucial chapter in the story following after the frankly quite predictable chapter that is the one before it. But assuming Toby Fox is drawing heavy inspiration from this game, this combination makes a lot of sense. He says in the newsletter following the reveal of Chapter 5 that it's going to essentially be the last fun chapter before the story goes all in on its darker themes. And what happens in SPM Chapter 6, the Japanese-inspired castle in which you battle against the King's warriors? Well, the world-ending void created by Count Bleck prophesized to consume and erase all worlds actually does destroy the Summer Kingdom before you can properly finish the chapter. It's a big subversion and a major turning point for the story, in which you realize just how bad things have become and how urgent it is to subvert the prophecy. I strongly believe by the end of Deltarune Chapter 5, something terrible will happen. Not the roaring, as I think it'd be too soon to start the ultimate calamity the game has been building up to, but I do at least think some major tragedy will unfold. Like maybe Asgore dies, or someone else in town dies, or is abducted by the night. Maybe this is the part where Chris loses their hand, like many people have theorized since Chapter 3. Whatever the case, after this point the fun and games are for the most part behind us, and the horrors are imminent. Well, that was a lot. I know my conclusions are sounding like what the ordinary Deltarune fan might have already pieced together, but I promise there's a lot more I have yet to even touch on. Like, for instance, the Florosprouts introduced in Chapter 5 are established as a method of mind control. Dementio uses these to his advantage after getting some from King Crocus, who he's friends with for some reason. If anything's gonna be our hint that there's an overarching evil corrupting the minds of other characters with the Shadow Crystals, then this seems like it. Many have predicted that maybe the secret villain of Deltarune is Friend, and they're going and giving out the Shadow Crystals to tempt other Darkners toward the truth of their worlds, and they're using this as some crazy convoluted scheme to sway the ending of the game in their favor. To be honest, I'm realizing a lot of this as I'm writing it. I'm like, holy shit, I didn't realize the Friend and Dementio parallels ran this deep. I was just gonna talk about how Flowey betraying Asgore is similar to Dementio betraying Count Bleck. So I guess if it turns out that Friend is actually the super secret evil final boss of Deltarune who's manipulating everyone to work in their favor, then I guess that's what I'm bringing to the Deltarune Crack 3 potluck. By the way, both Chapter 5s have a golden flower in them. If the golden flower in Deltarune is anything like the Amazing Daisy, we should be fucking terrified. I'll wrap up with Chapter 7 and then 8, but I really think all of what I just talked about are the strongest links. So, Chapter 7, the underwear and the over there, which are the Mario Universe equivalent of Heaven and Hell. Honestly, besides the fact that there are some form of Heaven and Hell in these two games, there's not much else I can think of. Unless, like, if you wanted, you could say Bone Chill is the tail of Hell, because he has a tail. Even though he does not take Crawl because he rolls around in whatever the fuck this thing is. Chapter 8, Castle Bleck. Of course, there won't be a Deltarune Chapter 8 as far as we know, so this is our last major stop. But interestingly, we kind of already got our Castle Bleck connection in Deltarune. I'm of course talking about Card Castle, which is also a castle composed of pure black shapes with white outlines, which in retrospect really makes you wonder why the first chapter of the game has an area with the same texture as the Roaring Night. It's kind of ominous. There's also prominently buffed versions of past enemies here. Cain, similar to Count Bleck, has had his sense of purpose warped and become an evil tyrant. But beyond that, the connection does fall apart quite fast because Count Bleck does not have a son or a big hamster wheel. So let's analyze a better Count Bleck parallel. Carol fucking Holiday. A cold, calculating woman who lost her eldest daughter. Ever since, it seems like she's become much less amicable to everyone around her and has dedicated herself to the dark conspiracy surrounding her disappearing. While we don't presently know a whole lot about Carol, we can deduce that she is somehow working with the Knight and might be involved with the creation of the vessel and might be trying to fulfill the prophecy. This prophecy, just like that of the Dark Prognosticus in SPM, predicts that a broken individual and their pawns will work against the heroes of legend to bring about the end of the world. Both characters are motivated not by the notion of selfish evil, but that they can see no other purpose beyond carrying out fate if the one they love is now gone. Whereas we don't know definitively what happened to December Holiday, whether she's dead, lost, or is the Roaring Night, we also know that Count Bleck's lost love isn't dead. Tippy, the partner who helps guide you through the entire game, is Lady Timpani, a human who was once in love with Count Bleck before she was killed by his tribe. He only became evil because he saw no use for existence if it wouldn't contain the one he loved. However, unbeknownst to him, a shaman named Merlee would find her and bring her back to life as a pixel, who retains only vague memories of who she is as a person and possesses important power. Now, I'm not going to say that Tippy parallels Rousey because he's secretly piles of Azrael's dust or some shit. That theory is frankly stupid as hell. But what I do think is interesting though is that perhaps this could serve as the backup evidence for the popular idea that the Roaring Night, while not properly December, is a fragment of her looking for her whole in the Dark Worlds. After all, the Knight is secretly working with Chris in some way. Lastly, of course, there are a lot of Undertale parallels in Chapter 8 as well. The 8 pure hearts that you collect throughout the game resemble the 7 human souls plus a monster soul. Dementio, the traitor, attempts to kill Count Bleck before he steals the Chaos Heart and becomes a monster, just like Photoshop Flower at the end of Undertale, minus the Luigi, and is then stopped by the power of the pure hearts for trying to play God. Honestly, don't know what this could mean for Deltarune, but assuming Undertale is a compromised version of what Deltarune will eventually be, there's bound to be something there. Maybe it's like Carol finally has been reasoned with and accepts the hero's victory, but if you went along with all the secret stuff, then Friend shows up and kills her or something. I don't know. Let me know if you have any actually well thought out opinions on this. So really, that's it. I ended up surprising myself with just how many similarities these stories have. Both are stories about a tragic character who lost someone close and couldn't move on. Both stories have their worlds threatened by a dark force enveloping the sky that could end all worlds. Both stories have a separate overarching pink and yellow antagonist who manipulates others towards serving their own selfish goals. Both stories feature 4 heroes: a mute human, a sort of dragon, a kind girl, and the green one. Even if me and you don't come up with any solid conclusions from all of this potential evidence, I hope it at least sticks in your mind. And in the off chance that some of this speculation holds up after June 24th, then maybe I'll become some kind of big shot in the Deltarune community. Whatever the case, if you thought this was interesting, share this with your fellow Deltarune people. I'm really curious to see if other people have thought of this or if I can help by shedding light on an obscure subject. Do you think I'm onto something and the Super Paper Mario connections hold a lot of water, or am I just being an insane person? That's all. Check out my other stuff if you like unhinged miscellanea. I'm gonna go work on my Minecraft texture pack, which, you know, I have videos on that too, if you want. Please subscribe to me. You gotta.